This is the kind of sermon, when we're through, somebody will say that's the sermon that should be preached for people that aren't here. Every sermon should be preached for people that aren't here as well as for the people that are here. It's an easy out. There's a difficult sermon to preach in some ways, and some of you will be a little upset. I hope not angry at me or anybody, but a little upset because there are some things that need to be said. It is granted that the people that are not here are the ones who need to hear them, but we also need to hear them. It's one of the upheavals of our lives, and it's too easy to throw the responsibilities to somebody else who, if only they would do it, it would get done. The fact of the matter is, as we begin to understand worship, there is nobody else but us. And only when we focus upon that single fact are we going to meet the needs of society, of the church, of our homes, of our own existence. It is a cop-out to say if only we had, we could. The fact of the matter is, we have to begin where we are. This is a series of sermons on the concept of worship. And last week I understood in my sermonizing of that point that worship is based upon not which makes us feel good, although that's part of it, as we just found out through the singing and the joyousness of song. Not that which somehow or another makes us feel that we've done something, but upon the divine imperative. God has said we must. Therefore, if we are faithful to the high calling of God, we must, regardless. It concluded the sermon with the idea of service. And that idea is so fundamental to the biblical understanding of worship that I wanted to devote the whole sermon to it and begin to take a look at the Pine Hill Congregational Church specifically, where we are, what we need to do in order to get where we ought to be going. Next week we have a communion service, and I will deal with the concept of worship and liturgy. What creates a good worship service? What helps us to find ourselves, the mood? What brings everything together? The music, the sermon, the prayers, your attitude. We've been experimenting a little bit already, and you'll hear more about it with how best to open the service. Do we have the candles lit? And as you come in, there's the choir seated, the music playing, and a sense of quietness? Do we light the candles as we did today? Questions the deacons will have to take up and discuss. How best to make the worship service meaningful for each of us? One of my favorite chapters, the 12th chapter of Romans, where Paul is writing to the Roman church. And they are facing some of the same challenges we are facing. And Paul writes, I appeal to you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God. What is good? What is acceptable? And what is perfect? Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good, love one another with brotherly love and affection, outdo one another in showing honor, never flag in zeal, be aglow with the Spirit, serve the Lord. I want to read that one again. Never flag in zeal. So I wanted to read for that one. Never flag in zeal. Do a sermon right there. But I'm going to go on. Be aglow with the Spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in your hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice in those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be conceited. Repay no one evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends upon you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. No, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him drink, for by so doing you will heap burning coals upon his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. The world is too much with us. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we have that is actually ours. I can't remember who said that. I usually do, but somehow or another it slipped my mind today. I can remember where I learned it. It was a 9th grade English class, nearly 30 years ago. As I was in the 9th grade, I had a sandy-haired professor from England who believed that poetry was the true beauty of all earth. And therefore, if he had no other cause, he was going to have his students understand poetry. And each one of us memorized a series of poems which we not only memorized, but had to stand in front of a class and speak forth. In terms of me, I think he was a failure. Poetry is still not my greatest joy because I have problems in catching the deeper meanings of it. But there are a few phrases and ideas that have so affected my life that have come out of poetry that I hold on to them with a love and a strength that is almost impossible to understand. This poem, I think it was Coleridge, this poem, the world is too much with us. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we have that is actually ours, is such a statement of the ever-contemporary scene that it ought to be a model on each of our daily thought patterns. For in a world which is constantly trying to achieve more and more in terms of its own personality and personal success, we understand that the constant pursuing of things ultimately lays waste all of the strength within us that enables us to truly be ourselves. It is a shame that we do not learn from the past. We revere the past. We talk about the past. We depend upon the past. We use the past, but we do not learn from it. For every generation has to rediscover for itself the basic truth, which is spelled out carefully within the biblical record and is spelled out carefully within all thought patterns, that people who look upon the service of others as the fundamental goal of their lives are the people who change the world and bring about happiness. And that people who turn towards themselves and their own existence without going on through to the service of others ultimately find misery and never find success. The question has to be raised. Service, yes, but service to whom or to what? I was meditating upon this sermon and trying to put some final touches together, and one of my favorite provocative writers appeared yesterday in the Free Press, as always, Sidney Harris. I don't normally read somebody else, but I would like to read a portion of his column entitled Man's Greatest Fault is His Greatest Virtue. I think at this point it helps us to understand the direction I hope we're moving. As a final thought before I leave on vacation, let me propound this question to you. What is the human trait most responsible for our chaos, conflict, and misery? Since I'm reading, I can do what you wouldn't do. You'd read right on. Most of us do that. Some of us stop and say, now what would be the one? So I'm going to stop. I will propound the question to you. What is the human trait most responsible for our chaos, conflict, and misery? How many answer selfishness? Oh, you guys are loaded. You're all afraid, aren't you? See what happens? They know when I ask a question that whatever they answer, they're going to get cut out from under them, right? How many of you would answer selfishness honestly? That selfish people, looking only to themselves and struggling only within themselves, are the basic problem that we face as human beings. That's what I answered.
I had one line that's greed.
Greed, okay? We'll put that in. Greed and selfishness. If I put the two together, do we have anybody yet? No, most of you, right, okay. You're nodding, but you're like this. Okay. I expect that if we polled 100 people anywhere in the world this question, at least 90 would unhesitatingly reply, unless they're in the Pine Hill Congregational Church in Gungshai. This is easy. Selfishness. This is an easy and obvious answer. An obvious explanation of our troubles. Probably also is true. But it strikes me as quite the opposite, writes Sidney Harris. While selfishness is a defect, a vice, if you will, it cannot account for the huge social catastrophes that afflict us with depressing regularity throughout human history. Our greatest fault, I think, is also our greatest virtue. And in nearly every single case of life, this is true. That what is a virtue done within a certain area of limitation becomes a fault if carried to extremes. Self-improvement is a virtue, but it's a fault if that's all that one does. Service of others is a virtue. It's a fault if there is no service of self and no recognition of the family ties. Giving is a virtue. It is a fault if one gives to the point where they do not meet the needs of those about them. Saving is a virtue. It is a fault if you save everything and give nothing. And one could go on. Our greatest fault, I think, is our greatest virtue, and that is loyalty to an idea larger than ourselves. Now reflect on that for just a moment. I think the reason that I read that with such interest and such excitement is because it sort of put into a little bit of a nutshell some of the things that we've been saying for years. When we did a series on economics and ethics, one of the things that constantly kept coming up of those who were in the discussion group was, how is it that people who are basically good and moral can make decisions in the business world which are totally corrupt and immoral? How is it in government circles that individuals who are basically good and moral can make decisions on behalf of the government that are essentially amoral or immoral? Since I don't acknowledge amoral. How is it that family structures, that individuals who are individually good and moral make decisions within the family that are destructive of the family and ultimately cause a breaking down? Why is it that within churches, individuals who come acknowledging that they are essentially good, wholesome people seeking to be better, make decisions on behalf of the church that are not only corrupt, but destructive of the fellowship? The reason is, if Sidney Harris has caught any aspect of the truth, is that individuals have given a loyalty to something outside of themselves which they conceive of as greater than themselves, and do not understand that the demands of that larger entity can at times corrupt them. Now, I want to focus on that for just a moment, because we see it over and over again. It is noble, says Harris, to be willing to die for a cause or an idea that goes far beyond our individual or temporal well-being. The concepts of freedom and independence sustained the American Revolution far more than thought of immediate selfish gain. But this very upward reaching has its dark underside, which makes it much treacherous, much more treacherous, or much as treacherous as noble. For loyalty to an abstract idea in the future has betrayed countless generations to kill and die for illusion, for bigotry and evil, more times than for goodness. Who can now make sense or morality out of the bitter religious wars of the 17th century when Protestant and Catholics contended furiously for an abstract, quote, religious, unquote, idea that had little, if anything, to do with the way Jesus asked them to behave and fought in his name. The only difference in our century is that the ideology has become political instead of theological. Wars and revolutions conducted for a national or political or economic abstraction that is mistaken for a living reality. The number who have died over communism, the number who have died over freedom movements, which essentially are not freedom movements at all, but are movements which seek to destroy the individual freedom. And what motivates these millions is exactly the opposite of selfishness. It is the drive to subordinate and submerge themselves in a symbol they feel is greater than themselves. For a hammer and swastika and a hammer and sickle or a flag or a slogan, they are ready to give their lives. Selfishness may motivate the leaders of such mass movements, but it is loyalty to a higher cause, however misguided, that permits people to discharge their aggressions not only without punishment, but with praise and honor. Of course, there are good and bad causes, but in the heat of opposition, even the good one tends to turn into the mirror image of their enemy. All conflict eventually reduces itself to the lowest common denominator and begins to violate the very principles people suppose they are fighting for. This is the human predicament, that more often than not we use the best in us to perpetuate the worst in us. Now, the reason I start off today's sermon on the concept of service with this rather lengthy discussion of Sidney Harris is because I think as we try to understand what life is all about, we are ultimately picking causes, whether we agree with it or not, in which we are going to give our full total beings. And oftentimes we do not reflect upon what those causes are, but we are caught up in it. We are caught up in business situations where we perhaps do not have control, but find ourselves flowing with a business that is causing us to do things which personally are repugnant to us. And I doubt if there is a single individual sitting in this room that at one time or another in their life has not had a business situation, a working situation, a school situation, a friendly situation where the concern for a larger understanding of life has not caused us to act in ways which we personally would not do if we had full control. The question is not whether we're going to serve larger causes or not, but which larger causes we're going to serve. And the thing that I have been saying to us as we've tried to meditate over these past 8 or 9 years over and over again, and it still needs to be resaid because it is so crucial to our lives, is that there is only one cause that is worthy of our total, complete devotion, and that is the cause of God. And the reason that's the only cause is because it is the only one which expands beyond us and demands from us the best. It too can be corrupted. The corruption in Ireland of the Protestant Catholic battles, the corruption of the 17th century, the corruption of the religious wars all the way up and down the line, the corruption under God of what's happening in Iran at this particular point with Khomeini, the corruption of the religious tool which has such a powerful appeal that individuals can be drawn astray and killed in the name of God is a very real corruption, but nonetheless, in spite of that, the power of God to stand over and above all human institutions, be they religious, be they economic, be they political, be they national, and to bring judgment upon all of our endeavors is such that it is the only thing worthy of people who are willing to take destiny in their own hands and direct it. There are good causes. There are many good causes. And each one of us is challenged every day of our lives to reach out and to help good causes. There's nothing wrong with that. We are all making distinctions. I support the Boy Scouts. I have absolutely nothing to do with them, but I support them. It's a good cause. It ought to be in existence. I support the Girl Scouts, just so I won't be accused. I support all kinds of good institutions. I believe they ought to exist and they ought to do certain kinds of things. I intellectually give them my full assent. And there are how many people sitting out at their homes and on the golf courses and traveling and in cottages and doing all kinds of things today that feel the same way about the church. And they support it in exactly the same way I'm supporting the Boy Scouts. It's a good thing and it ought to exist. But for me, there are a few causes which are not just good causes, but are causes that I think are good enough for me to devote my existence to. And I make a separation between the causes which are just good causes and for me the causes which help me to fulfill what is my Christian obligation. And because I'm a limited individual, can only do so much, I am very careful about where I put my time. For example, just because it's a personal reflection and it gives you an idea of where I am, some of you are aware that I am back on television on a thing called Sunday in Detroit. That is one of my voluntary causes. It costs me money. I buy clothes. I give to that program, which is put on and sponsored by the Christian Communications Council, at least my portion of it, the same kind of devotion and faithfulness and working with and time and effort that I ask each of you to give to this, your church. It is a cause which for me fulfills the concept of my Christian commitment, but it is a cause which I volunteer and give my efforts to. And it takes time. It takes efforts. It takes me out of my home. It means working around and moving scheduling. The fact of the matter is, it's a cause because I feel it's worthwhile, I make the effort to. So I'm saying to you, as you look at the church, there are many good causes, but one of the things that we're going to need to understand is a separation from the many good causes that we can get involved in up until the one cause or the two causes that are significant enough in your Christian endeavor and your Christian statement to make the difference that it becomes a prime, not a secondary type of thing. For the divine imperative, the divine categorical imperative, to combine divinity with Kant, which would make him turn over in his grave, eliminates excuses and means that we have to move. I mentioned before that we are nearly $4,000 behind in our pledging. That doesn't bother me. We're making it. Our bills are basically current. What bothers me is not that we aren't paying our bills, we're just not doing what we ought to be doing. It bothers me that we have not created the kind of space that's necessary for a junior high and senior high program to go, though that was one of our prime things. And with that $4,000, we would have had that space. That means that our program, our youth program, is suffering mightily because we're making it, but we're not looking and creating what we need. That's what bothers me. It bothers me that we've got a major rebellion in the Sunday school. This church eats people up like you've never seen. It goes through pastors, it gobbles. It goes through people who volunteer, it gobbles. Right, Archie? You go down in the basement and you volunteer to do something and you know you're condemned to the dungeons forever until you scream, "No more, I've had enough." And then maybe you'll get enough attention for somebody to say, "Oh yeah, you can take it one more year." We get people who are willing to accept responsibility in the position and we abandon them. Right, Bill Borglum? And the trustees say, "Oh, we got a good one going here," and we ate Bill up for 3 or 4 years. So it got to the point where Donna said, "No more, Bill." She should have. And we did it. And I can go right down the line, because every one of you sitting here, all the active families, that's why I said in many ways the sermon should be for some of the others. But the fact of the matter is we eat people up. We were astounded when Jill Crane volunteered. It's unheard of in this church. You never volunteer in this church because you know what it means. Maybe it's because Jill was away for a few years, and when she came back, she had forgotten. But when she volunteered to be Sunday school superintendent, and now she's feeling the frustrations and the anger and the fears because she needs 3 Sunday school teachers, and she's called and she's called and she's called and she's called, and we don't have the teachers, which means our kids suffer. We need junior high sponsors because we have a crying need for a junior high fellowship. But we can't find junior high sponsors, so our kids suffer. And we not only have the easy out, let Jim do it, which is no answer, because if Jim does it, he can't do it on Sunday morning. And which one of you are going to bring your kids the 20 or the 30 or the 40 or the 50 miles of our fellowship to meet on a Wednesday evening or a Tuesday evening? And we get into all kinds of problems of what are our priorities in life anyhow? How are we going to meet the needs? Structure is important only insofar as it enables us to meet the program needs. And we have those needs. And we have the frustration of people who are sitting downstairs. And it's not just in Pine Hill. Chris brought this home from the registration board at the university. We, the unwilling, led by the unknowing, are doing the impossible for the ungrateful. We have done so much for so long with so little, we are now qualified to do anything with nothing. Hang it up there. We will have 3 Sunday school teachers. Those of you who turn your back when Jill walks up, please don't turn your back when we walk up again. Please walk downstairs, and when you have a Sunday school teacher down there teaching your kids, say to him, "Thank you. And can I help? And what can I do to make it better for you?" We will develop a junior high program. I don't know where or how, but we're making the efforts. Because it is a crying need, and if we don't get a program for our young people, we are not training them the way they ought to be trained. We will do it. But I won't do it alone. We will do it. And we will continue to talk about it until it's underway. If you're willing to spend some time in the dungeon, which is now beautiful, but a dungeon because we abandoned people down there, if you're willing to make the effort, if you're willing to help out, if you're willing to serve, if you're willing to say this is a prime commitment, I am going to do what I can do to help you and to help the church to accomplish what it can. And the answer is now, volunteer. The answer is now. If you're behind on your pledge, catch up. The answer is now to recognize possibly that a pledge is something that changes. It may go down, we understand that, but it may go up. It's costing more to heat this place, just like it's costing more to your home. It costs me now nearly $6 to make a trip to Beaumont Hospital. A year ago, it was costing $3.50. It's 27 cents a mile, the government figures are now. So when I drive from here to Beaumont, that's what it costs me in my car. Am I right? Those figures are going to be reflected in our next budget. They aren't reflected now because I'm bearing the costs of the additional. But each one of us is going to be challenged to look at what inflation is doing to our program and our church. Each one of you is going to be challenged to make Pine Hill Congregational Church an even more exciting place to be. And it's your giving and your service. It's your balance between the two that will do it. Life is a balance of things. I have a whole other point, which I'll just pass over quickly, because I think we need to understand that oftentimes we're seduced by the world around us. That's what the phrase, "the world too much with us," means. Recreation, that is, recreation, is a valuable thing, but it's not an end in itself. And what's happened in America is we've taken the sport craze, the recreation craze, and we've made it an end. People now work to have recreation. People now spend their time and their monies and their efforts just towards the fact that they're going to have a recreational kind of a thing, which destroys the whole thing about. Recreation is something in which each one of us finds that which helps us to live better. It is not an end in itself, it's to live better. And recreation may be reading, recreation may be movie-going, recreation may be dancing, recreation may be golf, but when it becomes the give-all, force-all of all things, we've lost something. For the living of life is what is important. The strength, the internal, that's what's important. We are out of tune with our priorities. We are now run by the world. We are not controlling our destiny. We do not see where we're going. We do not see the weaknesses within ourselves, but we're too busy looking for weaknesses elsewhere. Our frustrations are coming to the point where once again we're looking for scapegoats. Racism is on the rise. Anti-Semitism is on the rise because people are frustrated and they don't want to look within themselves to meditate upon where they're going. It's easier to blame Jews or blacks or Hispanics or ERA members or somebody else. Part of the concept of service and part of the concept of the godly dimension of life is that all aspects of life are seen through the looking glass of the godly dimension, and the challenge to be holy even as I, the Lord your God, am holy. I have a request. I'm going to ask that we hold on just a moment for the final hymn. And that for 30 seconds, minute, or something, each one of us individually, within ourselves, takes a look at not only where we're going, but what our commitments to Pine Hill and thereby our commitments to God are. And I would reverse that. What are our commitments to God and therefore our commitments to Pine Hill? I would like to ask each one of you to review what you're doing, what you ought to be doing, and then ask the question of yourself, why aren't you? I would like to ask each one of you, if you make that kind of a statement to yourselves, to have the courage to make the change. There are needs. Somebody out there, new members, new giving, people who should be here but aren't, people who are somewhere else but aren't, are not going to meet the needs. They're going to be met by this group. We need 3 teachers. We need junior high. We need a lot of things. If you can do it, after the time of meditation, make your commitment to God, then make your statement known and follow through. Let us pray. Only you know our hearts, O God. Only you know what our commitments are. Only you know that if we're doing that which we ought to be doing, we ought to say thank you and continue. And if we're not, we ought to make the steps forward. For for this year of challenge is not going to happen unless we make it happen. For we are your hands, we are your eyes, we are your feet, we are the ones that give and support. But we can utilize thy strength to enable us. May we also, God, recognize that a commitment made is made to you. We may disappoint others if we break it, but we have to be accountable to you in the depths of our souls. Perhaps that is the most difficult and yet the most challenging thing. Bless us, for we only seek to serve each other through you.